Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice and very interesting beers from these guys over the years, and it's only fairly recently that I've been able to get a hold of their beers quite readily again. They did have a little bit of a kind of hiatus on production, but it was a couple of months back, maybe about a year or so ago, that they started ramping it up again, which is very nice to see. But this particular beer that we have today I think should be really interesting. If memory serves me correctly, this is a style that I've not tried from them before, and in particular it has a little bit of quirkiness within that style bracket as well, so I think this should make for a very interesting review. So fingers crossed it's a good beer, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, like I said, we're sticking to Sweden for this one. This brewery is a gypsy brewery, kind of based between Stockholm and Gothenburg, Göteborg, so I'm not sure exactly where to say this brewery is located in fact, but we're going to have a look at another beer from Mohawk Brewing Company, and this particular beer is called Baa Baa Barleywine. So this one comes in at 14% ABV. Obviously it's a barley wine going by the name, but this one is aged in Italian Grappa barrels. So yeah, very curious to see what this one has in store for us. It's supposed to be very nice actually. I know that Grappa is a wine or a grape distillate actually, so I'm really curious to see how that turns out in terms of a barley wine, because I've had quite a few cognac barrel aged beers recently, so yeah, I'm really curious to see how Grappa turns out. I'm not sure what the exact differences between cognac and Grappa would be, if there is a big difference, but yeah, I think this one should make for a really interesting beer, a 14% Grappa barrel aged barley wine. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. So this particular beer was released as part of the Lokal Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for March of 2021, and this was a little bit pricier. I think I paid about 80 Swedish kroners for this, but you know, when I saw it was Grappa barrel aged, it was one of these times where you just think, bugger it, why not, let's have a look at this. So yeah, 80 Swedish kroners translates to roughly 8 euros, probably about just a little bit over £7, like £7.25 sterling, and maybe in the region of $8, $8.25 American. So yeah, a little bit pricier, but as I say, for a beer that's kind of a bit of a novelty like this, it is worth it. And I've had really good beers from Mohawk in the past, and that was the other factor that was at play there. But yeah, like I said, very curious to see how this one turns out. Hopefully it's another good beer, and I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, let's go for it then. As always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Mohawk Brewing Company before, and hopefully we can add more to that list in the fairly near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review, especially if you know some more Grappa barrel aged barley wines and stuff like this. I'm guessing that might be a little bit more common in Italy, but do let me know about that in the comment section below. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Mohawk Brewing Company then, on to my brewery notes. So Mohawk Brewing Company, as I've told you already, are a gypsy brewery, contract brewery. They call themselves a virtual brewery, but whatever you want to call it, these guys are basically a gypsy brewery, and the company was founded by Stefan Gustafsson, who is known as Mr. Mohawk, and if you ever see him, you will see why. He has a big, massive mohawk. But yeah, he started home brewing in the 1980s because he was a poor student, and also because the range of beers in Sweden was very poor at this time. But he worked for Grebbestads brewery for a period, and then he started importing beers into Sweden. This activity was what evolved to become Wicked Wines, and this was founded officially back in 2000 along with Andreas Felt, and then he was later inspired to form Mohawk Brewery in 2010, having seen the success of the gypsy brewers such as Mikkeller and Toil from Copenhagen. But this company, Mohawk Brewing Company, is co-owned by Wicked Wines. But they've brewed their beers in a variety of different places, including the Proefbrouwerij in Locriste near Ghent down in Belgium. They've also brewed beers at Coppersmiths and Lake Brewery here in Sweden as well. And for a while they were brewing at Vega Brewery in Gothenburg, but when they expanded, they didn't really have any room for, you know, gypsy brewing and things like this to take place there. And so Mohawk actually went for 11 months without any production of their own until August of 2017. And this was when they started brewing their beers at Spike Brewery in Gamlestaden in Gothenburg. And I think Spike Brewery still use somewhere in the region of a quarter of their capacity to brew other breweries' beers. But in 2018 they managed to brew around 30,000 litres, and then the following year they managed to double that to 60,000 litres in 2019. I'm not sure how much they brewed across 2020, I wasn't able to find a figure about that, but as of March 2021, when I am reviewing this beer for you, these guys have produced around 170 different kinds of beer so far. Like I said, I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years. The beers that were always the most highly regarded from this brewery were, you know, the winter stouts and things like this. They always had some really nice imperial stouts at Christmas time. I had a few IPAs and things from them, which always turned out to be quite nice. But yeah, I would say this brewery were better known for their big stouts and stuff like that. But in recent times, they've been doing some really interesting stuff. You can check out my other Mohawk beers that I've released, and I do keep an eye out for what these guys are doing. But this one, as I say, in particular, just caught my eye. They seem to be releasing at least one beer a month through the Lokalis Moskalikt here in Sweden now. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Mohawk Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this before we open it up. As you can see, the artwork on this one is a little bit different. It is just a little bit different, and you can see one of the reasons for that is that it actually uses Marolo Grappa barrels for this beer to be aged in. So Marolo are from Piedmont, or Piemonte I think you would say in Italian, and that's northwestern Italy. The biggest city there I think is Turin, Torino. So yeah, it's basically aged in these Marolo Alba Grappa barrels. But yeah, the label I think is kind of made up to look like the sort of patterns you'll find on their bottles and boxes and things like that. But yeah, very nicely presented. It's a 330ml can, this one. So yeah, this beer you can see on the side here, it has a little bit of a blurb on it. So it says on the side here, Tillsammans med Grappa producenten Marolo har vi tagit fram denna dryck. So basically, together with the Grappa producer Marolo, we have taken forward this drink in maltig och söt barleywine med influenser från gamla och nya världen har fått gifta sig med resterna av druvdestillat från gamla ekfat from Piemonte. So a malty and sweet barley wine with influences from the old and new worlds has married itself with something to do with the grape distillate from the old oak vats, the old oak casks in Piemonte. Sutman från malten balanseras av tanniner och frukt från italienska druvorna i en spännande pikant ny skepnad där ravorna från två olika drycker möter varandra. So the sweetness of the maltiness is balanced by the tannins from the fruit from the Italian grapes in this exciting drink, which is derived from the raw ingredients of two different drinks. It's derived from when the rawness of two different drinks meet each other, basically. That's what it's saying. So yeah, kind of a rough translation there, I guess, a little bit, but I think it works. So yeah, like I said to you, 14% Grappa barrel-aged barley wine, this one. First Grappa barrel-aged beer that I've ever come across, so I think it should be quite interesting. But Marolo, of course, Marolo are quite well known in the Grappa world from what I understand. I will need to have a go at Grappa at some stage. I need to have a go at cognac as well and see what it's all about. But yeah, without further ado then, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. Very, very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. And that was full to the brim. So yeah, I've got a little bit over my fingers, but that's not such a big deal. But yeah, this thing was absolutely chock full actually. So there we go. Need to wipe my desk after this. Absolutely. But yeah, you can smell the grapes off this as you open it up actually. It smells very nice. And look at how oily that thing is. That is crazy. Right, okay. Yes, let me just check the can is in a nice position so that my OCD is happy. There we go. I've got the little viewfinder there and I think it's okay. So yeah, as you can see, this one's got a really interesting colour to it, I have to say. Grappa, I think, can be, I don't know if you have to make grappa specifically from red or green grapes or what exactly. I think it can be made from a variety of different things. I think it can be, you know, have a slight red tinge to it, or it can have a little bit of a kind of more gold, kind of greeny tinge to it as well from what I've seen. But yeah, the colour of this beer is quite interesting. So how would we even describe that? It's got a very dark sort of chestnutty mahogany type colour to it, this one. Absolutely. So yeah, lovely kind of dark chestnutty mahogany type colour to this beer. So remember, when it comes to barley wines and stuff like this, barley wines will tend to be fairly dark beers. So the colour of your beer is affected by a couple of different things. One, the type of malts that you use. Two, the length of your wort boil. A barley wine is going to undergo a longer boil, and the longer you boil the wort in a beer, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour out of it. But again, the level of that colour depends on the how would you say, the level of that colour depends on exactly what malts you use in the first place. But adjuncts and barrel aging are also going to play a role in this, and you can see a little bit of an effect from the barrel aging in this one for sure. But yeah, I can tell you something, the aroma is really powerful in that, but we'll come to that in a minute. But yeah, lovely dark sort of chestnutty mahogany type colour to this one, very, very dark. It's obviously undergone a boil of about 4 or 5 hours, which is normal for a barley wine, but 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of what would be the head there, but that, of course, as you can see, there's very little head on this one. There's just a little bit of a slight foamy ring around the edge of the glass there, which looks very nice. But I mean, at 14% alcohol, you know, you wouldn't really expect there to be very much in the way of head on this beer, actually. So yeah, that kind of makes sense. But yeah, nothing overly surprising about the beer in terms of its appearance. It is, you know, heavily dark chestnutty barley wine. So yeah, curious to see how this one turns out. But yeah, let's have a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. I'm very curious about this beer. Ooh, that does smell really nice. It smells boozy as hell, I'll say that though. So the first observation that I have is that of this beer is that the Grappa, it is not a million miles away from cognac. I mean, I've had quite a few cognac barrel aged beers now, and the effect of the Grappa doesn't seem to be a million miles away from that. So first off, you're going to notice that lovely big woody oaky sort of base to the beer. That's very, very obvious in this one, absolutely. So yeah, you've got a really lovely just backbone to this one. It's all about the oak. You can smell that smooth oakiness in there. There's a little bit of vanilla, there's a wee bit of a sort of fudgy type quality in there as well, definitely. And then on top of that, you get the grapey notes. It actually comes across as quite similar to like sultanas. And as I've said in other reviews involving the cognac barrel beers recently, for me sultanas are like dried white, green and sort of pinky grapes, whereas raisins are only dried purple grapes. So to me this one really has a nice like bit of a kind of dried sultana type quality sitting on top of that oaky woody character that I've been talking about. So yeah, the aroma on this beer I think is goes together very, very nicely. So yeah, the backbone of this beer, the Grappa barrel aging, is really nice. The one thing I would say about the Grappa in comparison to the cognac, I think the cognac comes across as a little bit more kind of smooth, if that makes sense, whereas it seems, and I'm generalising here, this is the first time I've had a Grappa barrel aged beer, correct me in the comment section if I'm wrong, but the Grappa seems to come across as a little bit more kind of raw, and it just seems to come across as a little bit more kind of raw and less oily than the cognac stuff has in the past. So that's quite an interesting point to make about this beer. So yeah, the barrel aging side of this one, that takes, you know, that really takes the fore, which you would expect, which you would definitely expect in a beer like this. But I have to say, I really like it. I really think this is quite interesting for sure. And that was the reason I bought this beer, of course, because it's just so unusual. But yeah, it's those grapey sultana notes really catch the they really catch the bottom. They really just form the base of this beer, and I like it a lot. I really do like it a lot. Yeah, let's focus on the malty side of things then and see how we go with it. So yeah, there's a lovely big kind of oily brown sugary sweetness in this one. I would say that the sultana type notes that you have out of this, the grapey elements, that really kind of suppresses a lot of the brown sugary aromas, and I think they're going to come out in the flavour, absolutely, but it's almost like the brown sugars are just enveloped in this kind of grapey, juicy sort of thing. In the middle of the palate, you'd always get a good bit of a kind of treacly molasses sort of thing, a sweet caramel, something like that. But in this beer, it really just feels that the barrel aging is enveloping everything else, to be honest with you. So that's an interesting observation to make about this beer too. But yeah, I mean, if you take the aroma in deeply, you can get a really highly caramelized treacle molasses sort of thing there, but you really have to, you know, take the aroma in quite deeply like this to get that, in my opinion. But yeah, there is a good little bit of a treacly molasses sort of thing in there, absolutely. There's maybe one or two little slightly nutty elements to the beer too, which is kind of interesting, but you know, it's really difficult to pick out too much more about the brown sugars other than to say, yeah, it's there. Yeah, there's maybe a teeny little hint of breadiness or something like that, or graininess out of the beer, but otherwise the sort of malty and kind of yeasty components of the beer are it's really just, it's all about the grappa and the barrel aging in this one, absolutely. But yeah, hoppy side of things then, let's focus on that and see what we can get. So on the hoppy side of things, you do get a little bit of hoppiness out of the beer, but again, this beer's just overwhelmingly juicy and grappa orientated, so that's not a surprise. Yeah, it's you get a little bit of earthiness at the back, you get a wee bit of a herbal quality there as well, and also just a little touch of floral character. I mean, it doesn't say how long this one has been aged for, and I checked on the Untappd as well to see how long it would have been aged for. I'm guessing it would have been at least 6 months, but at 14%, you would have to wonder, is it maybe a year that it's been aged for? I don't know. But yeah, in that time period, you're going to get a significant portion of the hoppy characters just dropping out of the beer. So it's not a surprise that the hoppy side of things just goes back a little bit. But yeah, on the grassy side of things, I think it goes together quite nicely. It does have a fair wee bit of grassiness to it, and I think that just gives you a little bit of contrast with the hoppy, and I think that gives you a little bit of contrast with the sort of woody and juicy elements out of the beer. So yeah, it's really interesting that it's just got a little bit of grassiness, and you can detect little bits of the floral and earthy kind of notes that I was talking about as well. So yeah, this is pretty interesting. On the fruity side of things, you know, as I said earlier, it's got a good little bit of a kind of sultana, grapey sort of thing, so that's not a surprise at all. But yeah, on the on the fruity side of things, it actually, what you'll notice about this beer, the more you smell of it, it actually develops a little bit of a kind of cakey type note. It's almost a little bit like a Christmas pudding. You really get this sort of spongy, fruity, brandy sort of cake thing out of this one, which is quite interesting. My dad, his birthday's in February, and my mum always used to make Christmas pudding for his birthday cake because he loved it. And the aroma of this beer on the fruity side of things, it really reminds me of that. So definitely a kind of boozy, cakey element to it. You've got a little bit of a datey element in there. You've got a little bit of prune, and like I say, you've got some sultanas in this. I do get a little hint of like a kind of blackberry sort of thing on the front nose of this as well. But yeah, the aroma of this beer is really quite interesting and quite different from anything else I've had before. So I think it's about time we crack into this. This is going to be a longer review because of how quirky this beer is. But yeah, let's have a taste of this one then. This one is the Baa Baa Barleywine, a Grappa barrel-aged barley wine from Mohawk Brewing Company, based in Stockholm and Täby to the north, but brewing their beers in Gothenburg, as far as I can figure, Göteborg over on the Swedish west coast. 14% barley wine, this one. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Ooh. That's really different. That is very, very different. This is different almost to the point where, if I was tasting this blind, I would wonder if it was a beer. I would. It's nice, definitely. But if I was to taste this blind, I'd probably think this was a liqueur, to be quite honest with you. Um, yeah, I'm glad I'm not tasting this blind because, if someone sent me this as a mystery beer or something, and this is one of my things about mystery beers, I think to try this without knowing what it was and appreciate it for what it was would be a little bit of a waste. But yeah, if I was to taste this blind, I think I would struggle to identify that as a beer. I would certainly have no idea what style it was supposed to be. But yeah, this is something else. This is really crazy. If you could see this, try it just for the sheer randomness of it, definitely. So yeah, where do we start with this beer then? I mean, I think what I said about the aroma, about this being overwhelmingly, grapey, about the kind of grapiness from the grappa just enveloping everything, I think that plays a role in this beer as well. Now, obviously, grappa barrel aging for beer is something that's not really been done. So, yeah, obviously there'll be a little bit of experimentation to do with how long you leave it and so on. But yeah, I think it does work. I'd be curious to see. I mean, the thing with a barley wine is the barley wine is, generally speaking, a sweet beer in terms of its malty side of things. Maybe grappa barrel aging. I'd be curious to know how it would work on an imperial stout. Doing it with a barley wine is a very nice idea. But I'm curious about this. With when the grappa elements in this beer are so powerful, I wonder if it's maybe been left in a little bit long actually, or how it. As I say, it doesn't tell you how long it's been aged for. I do like this one. I'm just trying to think of exactly what factors are at play in this. But it is nice. It is very, very nice, this actually, and it certainly makes me very curious to try some grappa, definitely. But it actually comes across in the flavour as being very similar to the aroma, definitely. So yeah, straight away with this beer then, across the middle of your palate you can feel that nice, smooth, oaky woodiness there. That just blankets the middle of your tongue. You can feel on the front half of that middle third of your palate, there is a little hint of vanilla in there, and it's kind of right in the centre, but it takes a little bit of a while to build, but really that woody character, it just has like a layer of fruity sultana sitting on top of it. It's really just got that kind of big layer sitting on top of it there. The woody base of this beer is really wet and sultana like. It just goes together very nicely. I like how that pieces together in this beer. Absolutely. You will also get, I do get a wee bit of nuttiness out of this one. I think that's fair. If you go to the very centre of your palate, then just move forward down the centre line of your tongue, you will notice a few nutty elements pushing their way out of this beer, which I can really appreciate. I mean, it's really interesting, this beer, as I say. It is all about, this is one of the ones where the barrel age, these kind of infused flavours really take centre stage. As I've told you in previous reviews, for me when it comes to barrel aging, what it does is it takes away some of the thickness of the beer and gives you these kind of fruity infused flavours in exchange. But yeah, this one, I think, this is a really interesting combination of things. I very much like how this, I really like how this one goes about its business. It's actually quite straight shooting compared to other barley wines and barrel aged barley wines I've had, but it just works. It really does. I'd be curious to see what grappa barrel aging would do to an imperial stout, and even a Scotch ale that could be quite interesting as well, come to think of it. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing to do, this one actually. So yeah, not sure what to make of that, but yeah, it's all about the barrel aging in this one. In the middle of your palate, you can feel that there is a sort of brown sugary element to this one. You can feel like a big sort of oily brown sugary element there. It does come across as being highly oily and caramelized, which I can appreciate, definitely. But again, the sheer power, if you like, of the kind of wet sultana grapiness in this beer. It just sort of envelops it, so you can feel that the brown sugar sweetness is there, and you can feel that as you go further into the aftertaste, a little bit of it comes off, and it gets sweeter and more oily the further you go. But it's not toasted or anything like that. It's, you know, it just comes across as a big oily sort of brown sugary mass in the middle of your palate. So I think that's you know, that's definitely a fair statement to make about this beer. I like how that pieces together. So yeah, it's in terms of barley wines, it's definitely not the most complex one I've come across, but the flavours are really interesting, I have to say. It is, as I say, oaky woody base, little touch of nut, little touch of vanilla, the juicy sultana-like notes sitting on top of that, a brown sugary mass in the middle of your tongue which comes out a little bit more the further you go into the aftertaste, and then it feels like the sort of sultana notes just go on top of that and kind of moisten the whole middle of your palate up. It's really interesting in that sense. But yeah, if you go to the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again, you can feel it's a little bit kind of thicker. So I really like how that goes together. Then on the back third of the palate, you do get a wee bit more woodiness kind of underneath. There's a wee touch of graininess there, and you can feel a little bit of airiness from the yeasty kind of notes coming out of this beer as well. You get a little bit of an almost kind of cakey note on the back third of your palate as well. You can just feel that there. So the flavour in this beer, it goes from being quite tall in a sense on the back third of your palate. As you go further forward, you can feel it condensing down, and as you reach that border region, with the middle third of your palate, it goes down like this, and then it stays quite thick in the middle third of your palate, but still very, very juicy. So I really appreciate how that side of this beer goes about its business. Yeah, it's for a barrel aged beer, it's definitely not the most complex, but I think the flavour really works in it. I think it is very, very nice. But on the hoppy side of things, there's not too much hop character to report in this. It is kind of quite similar to what we found in the aroma. So in the back corners of the palate, there's a little bit of a sort of herbally thing there. Yeah, there is a wee bit of a kind of herbally an earthy note there, so you get a little bit of that. It becomes more herbal as you move further forward, and you can feel that the beer gradually pushes its way up and becomes more of a... It gradually pushes its way up and becomes a little bit more kind of... how would we say, a little bit more sort of kind of just floral. You do get a little bit of floral note on that kind of front corner of your palate, which is quite interesting. But yeah, round the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit lighter and grassy, and you get just a wee touch of zestiness out of it, which I think is very cool. So yeah. So yeah, I think that the green component of this one just adds a little bit of depth to the flavour, which is nice. But yeah, a little bit of floral character, a little bit of earthiness and stuff, and then a wee bit of a kind of grassy element to it. This beer is very boozy though. It does have a really nice kind of boozy quality to it. But at 14% you would expect that, to be honest. So yeah, interesting, definitely interesting. So yeah, on that front third of your palate, if you like, that's where you always get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And I'd be curious to know what hop they've used in this. Would it be a bit of Bramling's Cross? It does, you know, the barley wine side of this beer, the more that I kind of drink of it, it does come across as a little bit more like an English barley wine, so I wonder about that. And maybe a little bit of Bramling's Cross involved in this one. But yeah, on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, there's definitely a little bit of a kind of cakey element to the beer, as I said. Definitely a bit of that going on, which I can appreciate. And yeah, you can feel those juicy fruity elements in there, but the base of that front third of your palate is again, it's a nice kind of smooth woody, and it's got a little bit of woodiness to it, and it's got a little bit of a kind of cakey element to it. So yeah, I do like how this side of things goes together. So yeah, the base of that front third of your palate is quite nice. But on top of that, again, it's kind of what you'd expect. At the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a bit of you get a lot of juicy kind of oily sultanas in there. You do get a little bit of a kind of yeah, you get a lot of juicy oily sultanas in there. You get a nice little bit of a kind of figgy note as you move further forward. It's got a wee bit of a datey element to it as well, I think. But then as you reach the kind of very front tip of your tongue, it's definitely a little bit more figgy, and a wee touch more, and just a wee touch more kind of It's got a little bit of a kind of black curranty type note in there. There's just a wee bit of a darker fruity note in this one. But yeah, it's all about the sultanas, those dried green, green and white grapes and things like that. I really like how all of this pieces together in this one. So yeah, really interesting. Really interesting combination of flavours in this. A very unique beer, and one that I really think you need to try for yourself. But I think that rounds off the flavour description of this one, to be honest with you. This is definitely a sipper that I'm going to sip on for a few hours. But yeah, interesting beer for sure. So in terms of the mouthfeel then, what can we say about this one? I mean, I think it's a pretty full-bodied beer, but I'd say it's at the lighter end of full-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's got a lovely slickness to it, a little bit of oiliness in there, so I can appreciate that. In terms of bitterness and stuff, this beer isn't going to be too high on the IBU scale, definitely not, 10, 15 IBUs at the most, to be honest with you. But the malty side of things, it's got a lovely slickness underneath. You've got a good little bit of kind of juicy fruitiness in there as well. The woodiness, it's just very slick and very smooth. It develops a degree of sweetness the further you go into the aftertaste. You do actually get a little bit of a kind of Werther's Original butter candy sort of thing out of this beer, which is quite interesting. And you've got those kind of brown sugar elements on top, which is very interesting. And again, it's all about the fruitiness in there and the barrel aging in this one. So yeah, lovely, juicy, dry sort of fruit characters in this beer, a lot of dried fruity character out of it, but overall it's just a really interesting and very, very quirky beer, this one, and it is worth trying, even if it is just for the sheer novelty of it. So yeah, thumbs up to Mohawk Brewing Company for doing something a little bit different with this. I wouldn't have thought that not many breweries would think to do a Grappa barrel-aged barley wine, but I think it's been a really interesting beer to taste. So yeah, after 2,800 beer reviews, that's kind of what you want. That is what you want to have on the channel. So yeah, interesting to have this one. So I hope that you guys enjoyed my take on this beer. Let's leave it at that then. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Mohawk Brewing Company. We will return to these guys at some point in the near future, but in the meantime, this one was the Baa Baa Barleywine, a 14% Grappa barrel-aged barley wine from Mohawk Brewing Company, a gypsy brewery based in Täby in Stockholm, but brewing their beers down in Gothenburg, Göteborg on the Swedish west coast. Slanja, skull, cheers, and catch you guys in the next review.